Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
She told me a story without glitter.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Beauregard, and it is performed by Gary Hall. It is featured on the collaborative album from Gary Hall and the Occupants titled Occupational Hazard, which you can find on YouTube. You can also find 5 other albums from Gary M. Hall and the Occupants wherever you get your music. Be sure to stay tuned until the end of this episode to learn more about Gary Hall's music releases, as well as his upcoming duo performance with his wife, Linda Adam Hall, as the acoustic duo Share the Road at Very Nice Brewing Company.
My breath's a simple song, though I know that it won't last for long. And the only cure is wisdom or the end.
Hello there, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers, and welcome to this week's Music of the Mountains, Where to Be and What to See, brought to you by the Mountaineer Podcast. I know, it's not Friday anymore. Time got away from me, but I am not letting this podcast schedule get off track once again. This is the companion podcast episode for this week's Music of the Mountains column, which came out on December 19th. Be sure to check out this week's edition of The Mountaineer to read more about the act featured in this episode, as well as plenty of other events that are happening across the Peak to Peak area. And hey, you might even see the top 5 picks for Pet of the Year in this week's edition. If you haven't subscribed to The Mountaineer yet, then please head to our website at themtnear.com and subscribe today. There are articles that you can peruse for free at your own time, but if you want to check out the full digital archive, read scanned copies of the physical editions of the newspaper, or potentially even receive a physical edition in your mailbox, then be sure to subscribe today by going to themtnear.com. And be sure to stay all the way until the very end of this episode to get a special discount meant specifically for podcast listeners. Speaking of our website, here's another quick message brought to you by The Mountaineer.
At The Mountaineer, we have been working hard on our new website. The new site is up, and through November, it is completely free to check out. That's located at www.themountaineer.com.
In all honesty, I think it's time to jump right into the interview, and I must also make a disclaimer that during the actual interview, which took place on Zoom on November 30th, 2024, we did have some minor technical snafus during the interview, but they did not matter in the context of the audio interview, so they have all been edited out. I am super excited to bring you today's guests. So, I'm gonna let both of them introduce themselves now.
Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Linda. What else do I need to say?
Talk about your musical background and anything else, music, running, hiking, whatever you do.
Oh, well, I've been playing bass in the Buster and the Boomers band for several years. And for our little duo, Share the Road, I just play acoustic guitar with Gary and we sing. That's what we do.
Linda also has done all the 14ers, and she either hikes or runs every single day. So,
Well, yeah.
yeah,
That.
that Buster and the Boomers is our Grateful Dead band, although we play an awful lot of other rock and roll and other kind of stuff. So we used to call it the Really Most Sincerely Dead, but nobody could ever remember that name unless they knew the Wizard of Oz like we know the Wizard of Oz, because that's a line from the coroner back in the Munchkin land. And so we changed the name to Buster and the Boomers. We have a young guy named Buster Jessic who climbs Denali and all kind of crazy stuff. And then there's three of us who are just a little bit older than Buster, who's like 37, but great drummer. I'm Gary Hall. I grew up all over the place. I was born in Southern California. Eventually, as I pointed out, I got an English degree, although it was 10 years late because rock and roll kind of got in the way. I had a long IT career, worked at the hospital up here for 18 years, overseeing all the operations and everything, and then retired from that a year ago. And then a few months later, surprisingly, got elected mayor of Estes, and boom, there you go. So my music recording career, which I thought I was going to restart after retiring at the hospital, has been slowed down a little bit. I've got a lot of original recordings out there. I can send you the YouTube link, but yeah, I've been playing guitars and stringed instruments since, I was about 12 years old. So it's been a long time. Grew up listening in the 60s and 70s and played all of that type of music, got into blues, rock, and jazz, and all kinds of other things. I play electric and acoustic, pretty much anything with strings. And I'm kind of a hired hand here in town also for whenever somebody needs a guitar player. I can fit into most types. We've also both done an awful lot of theater, although not recently. We had kind of a 15-year stretch from the late 80s to the early part of this millennium where we were involved in tons and tons of shows as actors, directors, music directors, orchestra pit, stuff like that. Linda played Ma Jode in Grapes of Wrath. I played Willy Wonka and Albert Einstein, and so we've had a theater background too. That's probably enough of rambling.
I must say, I have been doing music interviews and interviews for the Mountaineer in general, including for the podcast, for the last 3.5 years. I have never had such an in-depth introduction from any of my guests before. I love it.
Makes it easy.
Guys.
There, we're done.
Yeah, we're done.
Yeah, well, try to be a Renaissance man and Renaissance woman in the modern age.
And it sounds like you've both proven yourselves as such. As they just mentioned, their names are Gary Hall and Linda Adam Hall. As Gary just hinted at, he has released 6 CDs of original music, performed for and music directed many theater orchestras, as well as acted in many productions, held a long-standing career as an IT director for Experian, served as the Chief Information Officer of Estes Park Health for 18 years until he retired in 2023, and, as we'll get into later in the interview, he is currently the mayor of Estes Park and will serve his current term through 2028. That makes Linda the first lady of Estes Park. I might add, by the way, it's not just Linda who has climbed all of the Colorado 14ers. She climbed them with Gary between 2004 and 2012. Oh yeah, and the quote, "really most sincerely dead," is uttered by a Munchkin coroner during the Wizard of Oz musical number, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. Of course, many writers ended up rolling with that particular line when the actor who played that coroner, Meinhardt Robb, died in 2010. I'm not sure if using that line in multiple obituaries to send that actor off is endearing or off-key or a little bit of both, but honestly, it was probably inevitable either way. Anyway, the Wizard of Oz is not the primary subject of this interview. The primary subject of this interview is you, Gary and Linda, as you two will be performing as the acoustic duo Share the Road at Very Nice Brewing Company very soon.
Yeah, I saw the name Very Nice, and we hadn't played down in Nederland with this particular arrangement. So I contacted Susan through email back in the spring, and eventually we made contact and set up a couple dates. We played at the Gilpin Tap Room a couple weeks ago, and tiny little room, but this little acoustic duo fits nicely in that kind of stuff. I just like the sound of Very Nice Brewery. Be nice or leave.
Yeah.
And And plus, they have really cool beers, although we don't drink much anymore. But all of that, I'm glad to get down there and play in that area. You know, we've known Nederland forever, and it's a quirky and interesting town, and we love it. Estes Park is maybe a little bit more staid and mainstream than Nederland, and so we fit the quirky model nicely.
So you guys talked a bit about your musical backgrounds in the introduction, but I would love to know more. How did both of you start playing music in general? What are both of your individual musical backgrounds?
Linda should talk first. She was playing before I knew what a guitar was.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend who was a nun who taught me how to play guitar back in the 60s, and she introduced me to all these folk groups like Peter, Paul, and Mary and Chad Mitchell Trio. And the Chad Mitchell Trio, of course, they started John Denver's career. So I feel like I've known John Denver since, I knew him when, right? I played acoustic guitar in high school some, and then I kind of didn't do it for a long time. And so in my later years, I've been wanting to make up for lost time, because if I'd kept on playing for all those years, I might be good by now, And I was in singing groups. I was in madrigals in high school and stuff like that. And I'm in a chorale now in Estes Park. We do a concert in the wintertime and Christmas time and in the spring as well. And I hadn't done choral stuff forever. And so I felt a little fish out of water when I first started last year, but we ended up going to Carnegie Hall with our group, and that was really fun. So anyway.
Yeah, Linda sang in Carnegie Hall this May.
Yeah, last May.
There you go. Right? She's definitely one up on me now.
Right, yeah, with 200 other people, but whatever.
Well, I've always liked music from my first moments of consciousness, I think. But I was, we'll call it a Beatle boy. My father woke my daughter and I up, where we had just gone to bed. He brought us down to hear the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in February 1964. And that kind of was an ignition point for me, certainly on the rock and roll side, and very much got into stuff, although I listened to all my parents' albums, whether they were old pop stuff or deep bluegrassy, hillbilly kinds of 78s or whatever. They had all kind of stuff, Broadway show tunes and everything. And then in junior high and high school, started playing. And when I left home, I started getting serious and playing all the time. I played violin for a very short time, a couple of years in 5th and 6th grade, but guitar caught me much more deeply. And once I left home, I committed to either playing a gig every day or playing for 4 or 5 hours every day. And I started getting a little bit better. Over the years, played in a lot of bands, rock, blues, rock, other kind of things, 100 or 110, 120 nights a year. But at the same time, I was keeping an IT career, and we had 2 daughters and was traveling a bit on business. So kind of balancing both the professional career as well as the music career. And it's just never ended. I got involved in orchestra pits in the 80s and 90s and beyond, learned a whole lot of new chords, picked up the banjo and the mandolin along the way for different theater shows, and pretty comfortable in almost any genre. I have a lot of original stuff that I composed and recorded over the years. Got a YouTube channel, Radio Airplay, CD Baby, other places out there, but I don't make $1 million a year off of it. I suppose I'll have my first big hit after I'm dead and gone, but hopefully somebody gets the money from that. So that's kind of a history.
Well, of course, even though you two have dabbled in music on and off for most of your lives, you're now performing together. So the big question that I'm curious about, what is the story behind how you two met and started playing music together?
Linda also probably better tell the first meeting story.
Oh, well, we met at a commune, of course, in 1975.
In Lincoln, Nebraska.
In Lincoln, Nebraska, of all places. Yeah, he came to visit a friend, and there was food left over. And so we were talking, and he was eating the leftover food. And I just thought, this guy is one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life. And I just felt like I could talk to him. It was just instant. And we didn't start going out or anything for a while, another year, but that was my first impression. He was 19 when I met him.
Well, I was a very skinny hippie with long red hair down to the middle of my back. And so the second time we met, she also fed me. So obviously I enjoyed being fed as well as meeting a nice, sweet girl. But yeah, as she points out, well, we didn't get married for probably 5 years after that, but but we lived together for a few before that. So we've been together 44 years, officially 48, we'll say unofficially.
So you two have been together 44 years officially, as you married in 1980, 48 years unofficially since you started dating, but 2025 will mark 50 years since the first time you two met, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually.
Only 50 years since we met.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. And as far as music, I knew right away, it didn't take very long to find out what a virtuoso guitar player Gary was. And, and I messed around a little bit with electric, but not very much as with electric guitar. I still really like playing the electric bass, but at the time I was unfamiliar with that. But he introduced me to a lot of different musicians, and yeah, I learned a lot from him. But yeah, he's been a good guitar player for a long, long time.
So I assume that you two playing music together ended up happening pretty naturally over the course of your relationship.
Well, early on, yeah, we would play some folksy kind of stuff, but Linda also wanted to learn little things on guitar, and whether that was electric guitar or not. I remember working to teach her, for example, a guitar solo off of an Al Stewart song from the 1970s. I think he wanted to learn some of that stuff. And so I would figure it out and show her how things would move there. But yeah, I was involved so heavily, not only in my business pursuits, but in established bands that until we moved up here we moved up here in 2003. We've been here 21 years. It was sometime after we moved up here before we actually started playing more. I started playing solo acoustic gigs here in Estes Park. Up until then, I was always playing in a band context, not just solo acoustic. And gradually over time, we started doing stuff that the name Share the Road. Well, there's a band around the Front Range and here in Estes, which is where they're kind of based, called Chain Station. I don't know if you've heard Chain Station, but they get around and they're quite good. And I ran sound for them and their predecessors over at one of the local taverns for a while, because I do that too whenever needed. And we knew that band. And we also had heard at Frozen Dead Guy days about, 12 years ago or more, we had heard a band called Runaway Truck Ram. And so we started thinking, well, what road signs would be a good name for a little folk band? And that's where we came up with Share the Road, from the little signs with the bicycle on them, Share the Road. So that's how it got formed. But yeah, we've been doing this arrangement for a few years now. And we've got quite a bit of stuff between originals, old Great American Songbook type stuff, folk music, adapted rock songs, all kind of things. So quite a variety. We might do the basics like John Prine or Gillian Welch or different things. We might take an old rock song like a Bob Seger song and adapt it to the acoustic stuff. We do some of my originals, but we might do an old Tony Bennett song or something like that too. Or As Time Goes By from Casablanca, or something like that. So we kind of stretch the whole century, and we like to do something different every time we play. So no two Share the Road gigs are alike.
The funny thing about both of the bands that Gary ended up mentioning as the inspiration for the name Share the Road is this podcast has connections to both of them. I didn't mention this during the interview with Gary, but I promoted Chain Station back in April. I interviewed their upright bassist, John Pickett, as well as the newest members of the band Woodbelly, Aaron McCloskey and Brennan Mackey, to promote their joint show at the Caribou Room. Be sure to check it out if you're interested in learning more about those groups. With Runaway Truck Ramp, I have not interviewed them directly. However, I first clocked their name because in the late 90s, they played at the Fox Theater. And the opening band that played for Runaway Truck Ramp at the Fox Theater that night were a group that were just starting. In fact, that was the very first time they opened for anybody. That group is Yonder Mountain String Band. Last month, to promote their album Nowhere Next, I ended up interviewing founding members of Yonder Mountain String Band, Dave Johnston and Adam Agela. Since I went on a deep dive with both of them about Yonder Mountain's career, I ended up making that segment into a two-part episode with both of them having their own episode. So be sure to check out both of those episodes if you want to learn more. Anyway, back to Share the Road. Gary, you talked about how much you've written over the years, But Linda, I'm curious. Do you write songs often? Do you write songs every once in a while? Just generally, what's your writing experience?
I wrote a lot of doggerel poetry in high school. And some of it I did actually set to music, but I've only written a couple of songs. I haven't really done that much in that.
Actually, one of them in our regular rotation is a song about diversity.
Yeah.
That Linda wrote. We'll probably play it in Netherlands. It'll seem to be an appropriate place for it.
Yeah, there's a bit of a story with that.
Yeah, we'll tell the story at the very nice brewery.
Fair enough. Well, in that case, Gary, I'm curious about your writing over the years. What has been your favorite part about the writing process? What's kept you coming back? Are there any processes that you keep coming back to? All that kind of stuff. What's songwriting been like for you?
Well, I never threw anything away. And whether it was something that I had to write in a writing of poetry class at the university, or whether it was something that just spontaneously arose, or I've written an awful lot of eulogy songs about past friends or family, got things like that. But I would say my consistent theme, which arose out of the 70s when I was doing an awful lot of reading on East-West mysticism and philosophy and Alan Watts and Carl Jung and all kinds of other stuff, Buddhism, whatever. I even took a literature of consciousness class at one time in my English degree. So I would say a lot of it is music of consciousness, talking about the journey toward awareness. And I'd say there's a lot of stuff in there. But then I also started writing like kid type songs, entertaining type things for our daughters as they were growing up. So it would just be different parts of life. So it'd be kids' songs and stories, very sweet poems, or when I'd have an emotional thing like somebody passing away would oftentimes stimulate a song. I tend not to write things that have lots of repetition in them. And to me, they're kind of like a patchwork quilt of the whole life. I mean, if I listen to all of them, I think, oh, that episode or that person or that feeling of life. And I really have a whole lot more that needs to come out, but I'll see if I can make that happen while I'm still on the planet.
And over the years that you two have performed together, what's been your favorite part about performing together, whether it's in a band context or as a duo?
I like Linda to talk first.
That's a good question. I guess I like the fact that Gary listens and we work well together because he's a good listener. He figures out where I am and I try to be a good listener and figure out where he is. But it's been really fun. I mean, yeah, we have kind of a rapport, since we live together, can figure stuff out on the fly sometimes. And the audiences seem to like the fact that we get along. We're one of those married couples that like each other. I mean, it's always like people are always wanting to say, oh, don't you ever argue or don't you fight? And what happens when you fight? It's like, oh, no.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of disagreements. There's a lot of humor in it, too. We catch each other's humor very quickly, but we also can get very poignant in performance because we do songs that certainly have an edge or poignancy to them, too. So it's not just bouncy, happy stuff. We just a couple of weeks ago saw an old folk singer, one of them who wrote a bunch of stuff for those burgeoning folk acts in the 60s. His name was Tom Paxton. He's 87 years old and on his very last tour. He wrote like Bottle of Wine or The Last Thing on My Mind, which show kind of two opposites right there. The Last Thing on My Mind is as poignant a loss of love story as can be. Or if we do a song about someone who's passed away, I keep trying to work up one of the last John Prine song that he did called I Remember Everything. And I have a hard time doing it so far because it's so poignant that, it could bring tears pretty easily. So I'll have to see if I can work that into the performance. But then we have, I have a little Irish jig that I had to write for a class one time, and I set it to music and mandolin. And fundamentally, the story is this real sing-songy children's rhyme about running over a skunk. It's called Ode to Pole. And in the course of the song, I try to get kids or people to figure out, what are we talking about here? And I'll even put on the Irish accent and do some narration in between the verses and pretend I'm drinking my Guinness. So we have plenty of humor, but we also have the other end because we've lived long enough to have known and lost a lot of people too.
Oh, I wanted to tell one more thing. While I'm thinking about it, I took a Billy Strings song that I really liked and adapted it to Gary, and we do that one. We've done it a couple times, and I just changed the lyrics enough so that it would be appropriate. And I sang it to him on Valentine's Day for the first time. That's pretty sappy, I know, but it's a great song, and I just thought it was fun to do. And,
It's not sappy. It's very beautiful.
Well, it's just, it's a great song. It really is.
I didn't ask during the interview what the Billy Strings song was, but I did ask Gary about it after the interview. The song was In the Morning Light. But in regards to performing for both of you, what has kept you coming back to performing? What has stuck out to you about performing live? What do you love in general about performing live?
I kind of have to do it. I'm not sure when I first got that performance drive, but I've often felt that I was an introvert by heart who said, I can't live life this way. I've got to get out in the world, in theater, in music, even in business, even in now politics of all things. How did that happen? And it's just so essential to me to reach out and do that. As a songwriter, nothing's more important to me. I don't care if I don't get global airplay or make $1 billion off of it. I want it to be heard. And like I'm on radio airplay, which is, internet radio. And I keep getting these new fans. I'll have a new fan from Madagascar or Israel or London or Mississippi or something that, I listen to and really like this song. And it's like, that's what you want, is that connection. It's communication is what it is. And when somebody connects on a sad one or a happy one or one aimed toward increasing consciousness, all of those are very relevant to me, that there's a human being out there that I closed the loop with.
And it's fun if people actually applaud too. That's all.
Yeah, there's that. You like to get people in my rock bands and everything, that's the goal, is who cares about virtuosity? Let's make them dance. Yeah, our Buster and the Boomers, our Dead Plus band, is playing on New Year's Eve here in Esses, but 2-3 days before that is when we're at the Tap Room in Netherlands. And yeah, without going overboard, I try to use the mayor and first lady thing. I don't want to make it really explicit, like put it in an advertisement here locally, but if I'm playing in Netherlands, I can do it. I can put it in a little ad over there. So
I want to talk about the fact that you are currently the mayor of Estes Park. As you mentioned earlier, you didn't really delve into a political career until you decided to run for mayor, and you ended up being elected as mayor for the 2024 to 2028 term, following in the footsteps of the previous Estes Park mayor, Wendy Koenig, who, by the way, competed in the 800-meter races at the 1972 and 1976 Summer Olympics. But I'm personally curious, Gary, about what made you decide to run for mayor.
Well, I think I'd been retired for 4 months from the hospital and was working in my home studio and doing other kind of stuff. And the lady who was mayor said she wasn't going to run again. And Linda turns to me and says, "You'd make a good mayor." And so I thought, well, that could be interesting. But ultimately, as I got involved in it, and now 7 months in, I realized it's really no different than the jobs that I've been doing my whole life. My whole life in IT or other types of operations, whether in a hospital or a for-profit business, has been to listen to people and try to build whatever system they need or fix things, make things better, or if you can't, be honest with them about what you can or can't do. And being the mayor, that's pretty close to the same thing. I've got the political part of it and all that connection and managing board meetings. I've got the ceremonial part where I go to a lot of events, like I led the parade yesterday, turned on the Christmas tree light or the holiday tree, big digital thing in the park here. But the main thing is listening to citizens or visitors or merchants or other town staff, politicians, whatever, and trying to learn the breadth and depth of the issues and then trying to move things forward.
And Linda, what's it been like for you as the First Lady of Estes Park? What was your experience supporting Gary in his campaign for mayor? What was your experience watching him run for mayor? And what's it been like since he's been elected for you?
Oh, well, I was excited that he got so many votes. He was very well. Everybody was saying, I'm going to vote for him, And I think he's a very good people manager, and he gets along really well with people. That's really important. My life hasn't changed because I'm not doing anything else. I'm not doing like a tea or even being in the parade with him. It's like, I'm not that kind of, I'm more a first hag than a first lady,
That's an old theater joke. She used to play several parts where she was a witch or a hag. So she picked it up and called herself the hill hag for a while.
Yeah. So, it hasn't changed my life. life much. People ask me that all the time. What's it like to be First Lady? Well,
Yeah.
I've worn a dress once for an event, and that's something I'm prepared to do. But if you're asking about Gary and the campaigning and stuff, I didn't have anything to do with that. It was his trip.
She helps me proof articles to make sure I don't have any spelling mistakes or grammatical problems.
Oh, yeah, I'm a proofreader. I can't stand it when people do stuff.
Well, Linda's an artist too, and she takes so many photographs out in nature that this time of the year she puts together these day books that she gives or sells to people that have hundreds of her photographs from Rocky or wherever we happen to hike in.
At this point in the interview, Linda ended up grabbing her most recent photography book, Worthy Wandering, which serves as a weekly calendar for the year of 2025. I asked Linda if her photography books were available for sale in the community. She told me she handmade the books herself, except for putting in the spiral. She designs the books and then prints them herself. So because she's using her own ink, she usually only produces about 30 a year to sell to her hiking friends. After Linda showed me the cover of the photography book, Gary ended up flipping the interview on me briefly and asked if I was a musician. I talked about my musical endeavors. I already spent time promoting them on this podcast when I interviewed Carrie Miner and Ray Smith of the Strange Birds to promote their songwriting workshop, which I was directly involved in, so I'm not going to repeat that here. But during that conversation, I mentioned that I'm a Colorado local through and through. I've lived in Coal Creek for my entire life. I went to school in Nederland, and I just graduated from CU Boulder. And from there, Gary ended up talking about how he and Linda came to Colorado.
We took a long time to get here. It was after both daughters were out of college. We knew we wanted to live in the mountains, and if we don't go now, it'll never happen type of moment in 2003. So never looked back. It was absolutely the right thing to do. We went crazy in the mountains and still do. Try to get as many high peaks or lakes or any kind of hike, although I prefer summertime to wintertime. I suppose you're a skier.
Funnily enough, even though I was born and raised in Colorado, I have not skied since I was in 5th grade. I know it's weird to be from Colorado and to not ski or even snowboard, but Gary ended up reassuring me by telling me why he and Linda didn't end up falling in love with skiing either.
Yeah, well, our younger daughter tried to turn us into skiers when we moved up here, and it didn't last too long. I ended up in the Estes Park Hospital emergency room on my first escapade in 2003. So that ended our skiing career quickly. It's like, well, we kind of like our knees and our legs and our other stuff. So it is what it is. But there's plenty to do without becoming a skier.
I thought about telling Gary that the reason I stopped skiing in 5th grade was because I ended up going much faster down a hill than I anticipated and didn't stop even when a private skiing instructor tried to yell at me to stop before I ran right into a tree. He ended up having to ski after me and push me down into the snow so I didn't hit a tree. In the end, the only damage that was done was a scratch under my nose that was visibly bloody, but otherwise not very damaging as a whole. Still though, that put me off of skiing, but it wasn't nearly the experience that it sounded like Gary had when he tried to ski, so I didn't bring it up. But as Gary just talked about, there are plenty of other things to do in Colorado aside from skiing. And one of the things that he has loved doing recently, and even throughout his time working here in Colorado, is being a part of the community and outreaching to various members of that community.
I mean, I get invited to do all kinds of other things. Like there's a 6th grade drama class at the local middle school over here, and they asked me to come in, and they're doing a very truncated version, abridged version of Midsummer Night's Dream. And so they want me to come in and read the Duke of Athens, Theseus. And it's like, sure, community outreach kind of stuff. So I get a lot of those kind of invitations where I speak at various events, and I don't like speaking from notes. So it generally is whatever I compose in my head before the event. I'll talk to disabled American veterans or the high school 5th grade graduation, a citizenship naturalization project that they did, 33 new citizens getting sworn in. I got to welcome them and things like that. Those are my favorite parts of the whole mayor thing, actually.
It's just amazing to me that you are both still so involved in so much here in Colorado and have always been involved in so much throughout the course of your life. When it comes to the art that you guys share, when it comes to the endeavors that you guys take personally, when it comes to your goals as mayor and first lady of Estes Park, throughout everything that you guys have done over the course of your lives, what do you hope people will take away from what you have contributed to your communities over the years?
Well, Gary can answer this probably as well as I can, but I like to think that people, they come away from our performances and think, well, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should try playing guitar. There's a guy that started singing a few songs with us because he's sitting there, well, I want to sing that song with you. And so he said, can I do I Am a Rock? Yeah, come on up and do I Am a Rock. So he came over and rehearsed a couple songs with us the other day. And I'm hoping that, people take away from our activities and think, maybe I could write a song. Maybe I could play an instrument. I don't know if that happens very often, but it'd be nice if it did.
Well, I think just bringing cheer and light, even when you're playing things completely on the whole spectrum of emotion from the most positive to the saddest, I think people, when they feel real emotion, it helps keep the life force moving. When we talk about our physical selves and trying to keep ourselves in shape, I often say that you got to keep moving no matter what shape that takes. If you can't run or hike, do something, whatever physical motion you can do. And the same thing's true of mental and emotional motion, if you will. Emotional motion. Hey, there's a song in there somewhere where you've got to keep those flows going. And I think that the music, when you hear a musician that you like, it moves your emotions and moves your thought process. Whether you say it moves it toward light or whatever direction, it allows you to experience life that much more deeply and also share it with others.
And one last big question that I have. How have you guys kept such a passion for life after all this time? What keeps you going?
Never let the inertia set in.
Yeah. Always listen to music while you're running.
Yeah, Linda does that. I tend to hike in silence.
I have a running playlist and I have a hiking playlist, although I don't always listen to music while hiking because I don't feel like I need it. With running, I feel like I kind of need the distraction a little bit. So, but yeah, I just feel like I have to get outside almost every day. I mean, I go crazy if I don't. So it's out there. It's like you're under an infinite sky and you feel that infinity, I don't know. Sounds cosmic, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a good answer and I'd probably get off into some kind of hippie mysticism or something.
But, yeah, get off in that hippie mysticism.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, we spent a lot of time, not in like formal meditations or things like that, but an awful lot of study and interaction of life. To me, it's just a continuity. Just don't stop. Everything's connected to everything else all the time, right? And so there's plenty of energy sources for you to get. Just open up, let everything come into you, and then start putting it back out. I felt like I spent almost my first 35 years just taking stuff in, all sorts of input. And then somewhere in there, it was almost like the mid-'80s or something, I started with the output, whether that was theater or whether that was recording and composing songs or getting on stage in theater. And I feel like don't reflect on it necessarily, but just let it keep pouring out. Let it keep pouring out.
And is there anything else in general about Share the Road or other musical endeavors or other community endeavors that you guys want to add before we sign off?
Well, being a parent, the greatest parent you get is when your kids are getting to a certain age is when they tell you that you're cool. And it's like, whoa, that's great. I remember Frank Zappa, when his kids would misbehave, he would turn to them and say, hey, that's not cool. And everybody wants to be cool. So the kid would stop what they were doing and move in whatever direction he was trying to do. So we have great relationship with our daughters. And I also just love what I see in millennials and post-millennials. I sometimes, in the challenging world of American and world politics, am very encouraged by the energy and consciousness and illumination I see in a lot of people who are 40 or 45 years younger than I am, or more than that, 50 years younger. So I think there's a lot of good human beings in the world, and we're not going to be around forever. So I don't remember what the question was that stimulated this, but there you go. There's some hippie mysticism.
Anything to add? Well, our daughter's a really great musician. We could advertise her. She's a real singer. She's got a really great voice. Yeah, Melanie Joy Hall is her name. She lives in Silver City, New Mexico right now. Anyway, she's online.
Yeah, she plays all over.
She took after her dad. especially.
And mother. Yeah. They both have very sweet, crystal, beautiful voices.
Hers is the best, though.
Well, in that case, I think those are all the big questions I have on my end.
Well, we appreciate being
Thanks,
able to play
Jamie.
down there. Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much to Gary and Linda for coming on board and joining us for the podcast. It was a massive honor to interview both of you, and I think this interview was a total blast. If you want to see Gary and Linda performing music, then you can see them as their acoustic duo Share the Road, coming to Very Nice Brewing Company very soon. The two will be performing at the Nederland location, located at 20 East Lakeview Drive, number 112 in the Caribou Village Shopping Center on Saturday, December 28th, 2024, starting at 5 p.m. Gary has also been involved as a member of the group The Mountain Town Rockers. You can learn more about them by going to their website at mountaintownrockers.com. Gary released his CDs as Gary M. Hall, and his CDs are collaborative efforts with The Occupants. 3 of the albums released by Gary M. Hall and The Occupants, Occuparadise, Occupies, and Rockupants, are available wherever you get your music, including Spotify. 3 of them, Occupantaloons, Colonel Pecker's Homely Parts Club Orchestra, and Occupational Hazard, are not available on Spotify, but they are available on YouTube. There are 3 automatically generated topic channels where you can find all of these releases: Gary M. Hall and The Occupants, and Gary M. Hall / The Occupants. Gary and Linda both have their own individual Facebook accounts. As far as I can tell, Share the Road does not have a Facebook page yet. However, Buster and the Boomers does. So you can learn more about that band by going to their Facebook page. And finally, I did want to shout out the musical releases of Melanie Joy Hall. To learn more about her music, you can go to her website at MELANIE joyhall.com. She has 2 albums that are available wherever you get your music. Her solo effort, Falling to the Moon, which was not only recorded and produced by Gary, but also features guitar and songwriting from him, and an album released by a band that she has performed in Denali Park, Alaska. That band is called Sweet Ginger Heat, and the album is called Healy Heartache. Again, you can stream those releases wherever you get your music, and check out Melanie Joy Hall on her website, melaniejoyhall.com, or on her Facebook page, where you can see live streams of her performing with her husband, Kevin Kimura. Here's another quick message brought to you by The Mountaineer.
Are you interested in advertising? The Mountaineer has advertising in print, on our website, through our social media. We have 3 guides each year, coupon insertions, and more. Want more information? Email marketing@themountaineer.com or give Bethany a call at 720-960-2900.
And now it's time for this week's regularly scheduled Music Mentions, the final Music Mentions listing shows in 2024. Let's go. Head to Busey Brews, located at 70 East 1st Street in Nederland on Sunday, December 29th, starting at 2 p.m. to see Brandon Taylor performing live. Head to Eldora Mountain Resort, primarily located at 2861 Eldora Ski Road in Nederland, for a ton of performances coming up very soon. On Friday, December 27th, starting at 9 a.m., DJ Goody will be performing in the Boombox. On Friday, December 27th, starting at noon, Derek Dame Zoll, the current artist in residence at Eldora, will be performing in Timbers Tap House. On Saturday, December 28th, starting at 9 a.m., Godlaser will be performing in the Boombox. On Saturday, December 28th, starting at noon, Gratefully Acoustic will be performing in Timbers Tap House. On Sunday, December 29th, starting at 9 a.m., Be Random will be performing in the Boombox. And on Sunday, December 29th, starting at noon, Jack Clunan will be performing in Timbers Tap House. Head to the Gold Hill Inn, located at 401 Main Street in Gold Hill, on Tuesday, December 31st, starting at 7 p.m. for a very special dance party celebrating New Year's Eve 2024. The dance party will feature Dunk Maxwell and the D-Funk with very special guests, the Tom LaFond Trio. The tickets are $49 and they include a light dinner buffet, champagne at midnight, and beads. Doors open at 7 p.m., the music starts at 8 p.m., and the buffet will be served from the doors opening all the way through to 10 p.m. I didn't shout this out in the previous episode. Head to the Gold Hill General Store located at 531 Main Street in Gold Hill on Tuesday, December 24th. That's Christmas Eve, starting at 5:30 p.m., for a live performance from Derek Damesole. Head to the Jamestown Mercantile, located at 108 Main Street in Jamestown on Wednesday, December 25th, starting at 5 p.m. for a Christmas Day open mic. Head there on Thursday, December 26th, starting at 7 p.m. to see Emily Peters performing live, and on Friday, December 27th, starting at 7 p.m. to see Patrick Keenan and Chuck Sotero of High Lonesome performing live. Knotted Root Brewing is hosting their regular music events at 250 North Caribou Street in Nederland. Every Wednesday at 6 p.m., they host open mic nights. Every Friday at 7:30 p.m., they host DJ nights. Every second Friday, starting at 7:30 p.m., they host reggae DJ nights. And every Sunday at 5 p.m., they host Jazz Sundays. And finally, pick your preference. If you want to head over to Gilpin County, be sure to head to the Very Nice Brewing Company location at 180 Jankowski Drive in Blackhawk on Saturday, December 28th, starting at 5 p.m. to see Mountain Reverb performing live. If you want to head over to Nederland, then be sure to head over to the Very Nice Brewing location at 20 East Lakeview Drive, number 112, in the Caribou Village Shopping Center on Saturday, December 28th at 5 p.m. to see Share the Road performing live. Did we miss you or any of your performances? Do you want to submit your music listing in the Peak to Peak area? Do you have updates to your business or to your performances? Please call 303-810-5409 or email info@themountaineer.com to be included in the next print edition or the next podcast of The Mountaineer. Thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in for this episode of Music of the Mountains, Where to Be and What to See, brought to you by the Mountaineer Podcast. I will be back very soon, but I gotta be honest, I'm not entirely sure what my interview schedule is going to look like next week. I have plans, but I don't know if they'll come to fruition in the time that I hope they will. So, at the very least, I will see you guys next week in our regularly scheduled Music of the Mountains segment, this time actually on Friday. In the meantime, if you want to share this episode around with whoever you see fit, then be sure to head to our website at themtnear.com and scroll near to the bottom, or head to our podcast's main hub at the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com to check out every episode from all the way back in 2021. If you would like to be involved in the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you have something to promote in the Peak to Peak area, you're involved in the Peak to Peak area, you're coming to the Peak to Peak area, you live in the Peak to Peak area, whatever it is, if it's a story involving the Peak to Peak area and you want to promote it here on the podcast through your voice or through advertising, then be sure to email me at media@themountaineer.com and we'll get something sorted for you. I will see you guys very soon for another episode of the Mountaineer Podcast. Have a great rest of your day.
Have another Guinness, boys.
Oh, yeah. Don't mind if I do.
Where you been, James?
Think I need another one.
Why is that,
Had
Jim?
a little mishap on the road. Let me tell you about it.
Nostrils enraged by a foul scent, engaged in the sticky fall air, overpowered.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Eau de Pole, and it is performed by Gary Hall, released on the collaborative album by Gary M. Hall and the Occupants titled Occupational Hazard. You can stream that album as well as 5 others on various places, including YouTube and Spotify. For more information about Gary Hall as a musician, be sure to check out the website of one of his bands, mountaintownrockers.com, and to see him performing with his wife Linda Adam Hall at Very Nice Brewing Company as the acoustic duo Share the Road, be sure to head over to the Nederland location at 20 East Lakeview Drive, number 112 in the Caribou Village Shopping Center on Saturday, December 28th, starting at 5 p.m.
And swerve if I dare, if the curbs on the trees will allow. My sorrow is nil, no it's fear of the ill rising sun that so quickly will follow.
could move down to the other end of the bar. It's not that we don't like your company, but as you were saying,
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.